I am 52 years old, a woman who has lived a quiet life by design. The day my world cracked open started with a phone call from my only child, my daughter, Chloe. She had married a man named Mark 6 months prior, a man who moved in circles I had only read about in magazines. He was all charisma and shiny suits, and he had swept my practical, down-to-earth daughter off her feet. Or so I had thought. The phone rang, and her name flashed on the screen. I smiled, expecting to hear about her day, perhaps a funny story about their new puppy. Instead, her voice was tight, laced with an unfamiliar condescension. "Mom, Mark and I were just talking," she began, the words clipped and rehearsed. "We were looking at our financial portfolio, and it is just staggering what is possible when you have the right guidance." I waited, unsure where this was going. "That is wonderful, sweetie," I said, my voice warm. "Yes, it is," she continued, a sigh puffing through the receiver. "And it got me thinking about you, about your situation. We are worried." I felt a small knot of confusion in my stomach. "My situation? I am fine, Chloe. The house is paid off, I have my savings. There is nothing to worry about." "That is exactly what I am talking about," she said, her tone shifting from concern to pity. "Mom, savings is not a plan. It is what people do when they do not know any better. Mark says that money sitting in a bank is actually losing value. It is just sad." The word sad landed like a stone. I gripped the phone tighter. "I have always been careful with my money, you know that." "I know," she said, and the pity in her voice was even thicker now. "You have been careful, but you have never been ambitious. You never had to be. It is not your fault. You are just a poor old housewife, and that is okay. But Mark and I want to help you. We want to elevate you." Poor old housewife. The words echoed in the silent kitchen. All the years of sacrifice, of late nights and early mornings, of building something from nothing, all of it was erased by that one simple, brutal phrase. She saw me as a relic, a coupon clipping, budget balancing cliché who knew nothing of the real world she had just entered. The hurt was sharp and immediate, a physical ache in my chest. But beneath the hurt, something else sparked, a cold, quiet anger. "I do not need elevating, Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "See? This is what I mean," she said, exasperated. "You are resistant to change. You're stuck. Just let Mark take a look at your finances. He can make your little nest egg actually do something for once. He is doing this as a favor, you know. He is a very busy man." I thought of the empire I had built in secret, the company I started on my kitchen table 20 years ago. The company that was now worth $485 million. The company whose identity was so carefully guarded that not even my own daughter knew I was its founder. I had done it to give her a normal life, to protect her from the pressures and distortions of great wealth. I wanted her to grow up grounded, to value people over possessions. And in my success, I had created a monster of ignorance. She was so insulated from my reality that she could look at her own mother and see nothing but a failure. "I will think about it," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I had to get off the phone before I said something I could not take back. "Do not think too long, Mom," she said, her voice brightening, as if she had just won a great victory. "Mark says opportunity does not wait for people who are slow. I have to go. We're looking at a new yacht this afternoon. Talk later." The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. The silence of my simple, comfortable house. The silence of a life I had carefully curated for peace and privacy. And in that silence, I made a decision. My daughter wanted to see how the real world worked. Fine. I would show her. I walked over to the counter and picked up my personal laptop, the one I used for emails and browsing recipes. I opened a secure browser and logged into a portal that did not exist for 99.9% of the world. I typed a short, encrypted message to the public face of my company, my partner and trusted friend, David. "David," I wrote, "we have a problem, and I think it might involve my family. Later that evening, my best friend Sarah called. She could always tell when something was wrong. I did not even have to say hello. "Okay, Helen, what did she do now?" Sarah asked, her voice a comforting blend of sympathy and righteous indignation on my behalf. I recounted the conversation with Chloe, word for word. I repeated the phrase, "poor old housewife," and felt the sting of it all over again. Sarah was silent for a moment, and I knew she was absorbing the full weight of the insult. "Oh, honey," she finally said, her voice soft. "I am so sorry. That is just cruel. After everything you have done for her." "The irony is what gets me, Sarah," I confessed, pacing my living room. "I built a fortress to keep her safe, and now she is standing outside of it, throwing stones at me because she thinks it is a shack." "She is blinded by the money," Sarah said. "This Mark character, he sounds like he is brainwashing her. All that talk about portfolios and elevating you. It is disgusting." "It is," I agreed. "But it is more than that. It is the pity, the way she spoke to me, like I was a child who needed to be guided. She has no idea. She has no idea who I am." "Well, maybe it is time she found out," Sarah suggested, a hint of steel in her voice. "Maybe it is time you stopped protecting her from the truth and let her see the consequences of her own snobbery." "I am starting to think you are right," I said, stopping in front of the window and looking out at the quiet, tree-lined street. "I think it is time for a lesson in reality." The conversation with Sarah solidified my resolve. This was no longer just about hurt feelings. It was about respect. It was about the legacy I had built and the values I had tried to instill in my daughter. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of them, and I was going to have to guide her back, even if the path was painful. The next day, David replied to my message. His response was brief and to the point. "Call me on the secure line. Urgent." I went into my home office, a room Chloe had always called my hobby room, and closed the door. I activated the encrypted phone and dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. "Helen, what is going on?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "Your message was cryptic." "My daughter has married a man named Mark Vance," I explained, getting straight to the point. "He runs a company called Venture Corp. Does that name mean anything to you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was a long pause, long enough for the knot in my stomach to tighten into a cold, hard ball of dread. "Yes," David said finally, his voice low. "It means something. Venture Corp submitted an unsolicited acquisition offer for Oratech 3 days ago." I felt the air leave my lungs. It was all connected. Chloe's sudden concern for my finances, her husband's favor of looking over my little nest egg. It was not a favor. It was reconnaissance. They were probing for weakness, trying to see what kind of personal assets the poor old housewife had, perhaps to understand the founder she was connected to. But they had no idea she and the founder were the same person. "Tell me about the offer," I said, my voice dangerously steady. "It is hostile, Helen," David said bluntly. "And it is low. They are undervaluing us by at least 30%. It is an insulting offer, frankly. I was going to tell you about it at our quarterly review next week. I assumed we would dismiss it out of hand." "They are trying to steal my company," I whispered, the reality of it settling in. My son-in-law was trying to steal my company, and he was using my own daughter as a pawn to do it. "It looks that way," David confirmed. "From what I can tell, Venture Corp is a house of cards. They have a lot of debt, a lot of flash, but not much in the way of solid assets or intellectual property. Acquiring Oratech would solve all of their problems. They would get our patents, our cash reserves, our talent." "And what would happen to my people?" I asked, thinking of the hundreds of employees I considered family. "They would be dismantled," David said, his voice grim. "The offer includes language about synergistic restructuring, that is corporate speak for mass layoffs. They would strip Oratech for parts and sell what they could not use." The cold anger I had felt earlier now burned hot. This was not just an insult anymore. This was a war. "David," I said, my voice clear and hard, "I want you to schedule a meeting with Mark Vance and his team. Tell them we are considering their offer." I want to be in that meeting. Helen, are you sure? David asked, surprised. You have never attended an external meeting before. Your anonymity has been our greatest asset. I am sure, I said. My anonymity is about to become my greatest weapon. Just tell them that the founder, L. Monroe, will be there along with her personal consultant. And who is the consultant? David asked. Me, I replied. Just me. Mrs. Helen Peterson, a poor old housewife. There was another pause, and then I heard a slow smile in David's voice. I see, he said. This is going to be interesting. Interesting does not even begin to cover it, I said. Send me everything you have on Venture Corp. I want to know every skeleton in Mark Vance's closet. I want to know where every dollar of his debt is held. I want to know everything. Consider it done, David said. I will have a full dossier on your desk by morning. We hung up, and I sat in my hobby room for a long time, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Chloe's condescension, Mark's smarmy charm, the unsolicited offer. It was a coordinated attack, and they thought they were targeting a ghost, an anonymous founder they could bully and lowball. They had no idea they were coming after me. They had poked a bear they did not even know existed. The dossier from David arrived the next morning via a secure courier. It was thick, bound in a plain black cover. I spent the entire day in my office, reading every page, absorbing every detail. David was right. Venture Corp was a sham. It was built on a mountain of debt and leveraged investments. Mark Vance was a master of appearances, of creating the illusion of success where there was only desperation. He had wooed investors with big promises and slick presentations, but the company was bleeding money. The acquisition of Oratech was not just a strategic move, it was a lifeline. Without it, Venture Corp would collapse within 6 months. As I read, my anger was slowly replaced by a profound sense of sadness for my daughter. She was not just a pawn in this. She was a victim. Mark had not married her for love. He had married her for a connection, however tenuous, to L. Monroe. He must have found out somehow that Chloe was my daughter, and he must have assumed that a simple housewife would be the key to pressuring her reclusive, wealthy mother. He had miscalculated on a colossal scale. He thought he was playing checkers with a lonely widow, but he had just stumbled into a chess match with a queen. That afternoon, Chloe called again. Her tone was chipper, almost manic. Mom, I have the most exciting news, she chirped. Mark's big deal is moving forward. The other company is interested. He is going to be on the cover of magazines. I kept my voice even. That is wonderful news, Chloe. What company is it? Oh, it is all very secret, she said dismissively. You know, non-disclosure agreements and all that. It is way over my head and definitely way over yours. But the important thing is, Mark is going to be a titan of industry, and he wants you to be there to see it. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? The final meeting is next week, she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. And Mark has arranged for you to come. He wants you to sit in to see how these things work. He said it would be a good educational experience for you. A little peek behind the curtain of real power. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it took my breath away. He was not just using her, he was rubbing my face in it. He was orchestrating my humiliation, bringing the poor old housewife to the boardroom to witness his triumph. He wanted me to see him conquer the ghost of L. Monroe, never knowing I was both. This was his fatal mistake. I do not know, Chloe, I said, feigning hesitation. It sounds very intimidating. I might be out of place. Nonsense, she insisted. Mark wants you there. He says it is important for family to support each other. You will just sit in the back and be quiet. It will be fine. I will be there with you. We can hold hands if you get scared. Hold hands if I get scared. The condescension was so thick I could have choked on it. All right, Chloe, I said, my voice soft. If it means that much to you and Mark, I will be there. Wonderful, she exclaimed. I will send you the details. Oh, and Mom? Try to wear something nice. Not your gardening clothes. This is a very important day for us. She hung up before I could reply. I looked at the phone in my hand, then at the open dossier on my desk. The plan was no longer just about saving my company. It was about saving my daughter from the predator she had married. And to do that, I had to destroy him completely. I spent the next few days preparing. I worked with David to craft our counter-strategy. We would not just reject their offer. We would dismantle their company. I found a clause in their loan agreements, a covenant tied to their public statements. Mark had been making wildly optimistic projections about Venture Corp's future, projections that were legally binding. His acquisition of Oratech was the linchpin of those projections. If it failed, he would be in default. I also did something I had never done before. I called my lawyer, not my corporate lawyer, but my personal one, a man named Arthur, who had handled my will and my quiet real estate holdings for years. He knew about Oratech, as he had helped me set up the trust that held my shares. Arthur, I said, I need you to do something for me. I need you to prepare a document. A post-nuptial agreement for my daughter, Chloe. A post-nup, he asked, surprised. That is unusual, Helen. Is everything all right? Everything is about to change, I said. I want the agreement to state that in the event of a divorce, Chloe forfeits any claim to Mark's assets, but he also forfeits any claim to hers, including any future inheritance or gifts from her family. That is an ironclad wall, Arthur said. It will protect her completely. But will she sign it? I am not going to ask her to, I said. I am going to have Mark demand it. Arthur was confused, but he trusted me. I will draw it up immediately. My plan was forming, each piece clicking into place. I was not just going to win this fight. I was going to script every scene of Mark Vance's downfall. The day of the meeting arrived. It was a crisp autumn morning. I dressed simply, in a gray pantsuit that was professional but unremarkable. I did not look like the founder of a nearly $500 million company. I looked like a suburban mother who had dressed up for a special occasion. It was perfect. I drove myself to the gleaming glass tower that housed Venture Corp's headquarters. The lobby was a monument to ego, all marble and chrome, with a giant, abstract sculpture that probably cost more than my house. I gave my name, Helen Peterson, at the front desk. The receptionist looked at me with a flicker of confusion before finding my name on the visitor list, listed as a guest of Chloe Vance. Chloe met me at the elevator bank. She was dressed in a sharp, expensive dress that looked uncomfortable. She gave me a quick, nervous hug. "Mom, you came," she said, her eyes darting around the lobby as if she was embarrassed to be seen with me. "Okay, just a few rules. Do not speak unless you are spoken to. Do not touch anything. And please, try to look impressed." "I will do my best," I said, my voice betraying none of the storm raging inside me. She led me down a long hallway to a massive boardroom. A long, polished table dominated the room, surrounded by leather chairs. At the head of the table sat Mark Vance, flanked by two lawyers who looked like they had been carved from granite. He stood up when we entered, a wide, predatory smile plastered on his face. "Helen, so glad you could make it," he said, striding over to shake my hand. His grip was firm, a classic power move. "Chloe has told me so much about you. It is a pleasure to finally meet the woman behind the woman." "Mark," I said, my voice neutral. "Thank you for inviting me." "Of course," he said, gesturing to a small chair against the wall, far from the main table. "We have saved a spot for you right here, where you can have a great view of the proceedings. Chloe will sit with you." He was treating me like a child on a field trip. Chloe dutifully took the seat next to me, giving my hand a patronizing squeeze. "Just relax, Mom," she whispered. "This will all be over soon." "I am counting on it," I said, my eyes fixed on her husband. A few minutes later, David arrived with our legal team. He was the picture of corporate power, exuding confidence and control. He nodded politely to Mark's team and took a seat directly opposite him. He did not acknowledge me, as we had planned. To everyone in this room, I was invisible, a piece of furniture. Mark cleared his throat and began the meeting. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice booming with false confidence, "thank you for coming. We are here today to finalize the terms of VentureCorp's acquisition of Oratech. We believe our offer is more than generous, and we are excited to welcome your innovative company into our portfolio. He then launched into a presentation, a slick slideshow filled with buzzwords and hockey stick charts projecting meteoric growth. He talked about synergy, disruption, and value creation. He spoke as if the deal was already done, as if this meeting was a mere formality. I listened quietly, my expression unreadable. Chloe, beside me, was glowing with pride. She would occasionally lean over and whisper things like, "Isn't he brilliant, Mom? He is a genius." I just nodded, my eyes never leaving Mark. I watched him lie. I watched him preen. I watched him dance on the edge of his own grave. When his presentation was finished, he sat back in his chair, a smug look on his face. "So, David," he said, "I trust you have the paperwork ready for us to sign?" David did not answer immediately. He opened his briefcase and took out a single folder. He slid it across the table to Mark. "Before we discuss your offer," David said, his voice calm and steady, "we have a counteroffer for you to consider." Mark laughed, a short, barking sound. "A counteroffer? You are not in a position to be making offers, David. We are acquiring you, not the other way around." "I suggest you open the folder, Mr. Vance," David said. Mark's smile faltered. He reluctantly opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page. I watched the color drain from his face. His confident posture collapsed. He looked up at David, his eyes wide with disbelief and panic. "What is this?" he stammered. "This is insane. You cannot." "We can and we are," David said. "That is a cash offer from Oratech to acquire all of VentureCorp's outstanding debt. Every loan, every line of credit. We have already spoken to your creditors. They are quite eager to accept our offer. It seems they are getting nervous about your ability to pay them back." Chloe looked from Mark to David, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Mark? What is he talking about? What debt?" Mark ignored her. He was staring at David, his jaw working. "This is a joke. You do not have that kind of capital." "Our financials are quite solid," David said with a thin smile. "Unlike yours. We also noticed some interesting covenants in your loan agreements. Specifically, the ones tied to your public growth projections. The projections that were entirely dependent on you successfully acquiring Oratech. If this deal does not go through today, as you have so publicly promised your investors it would, you will be in immediate default. And your new creditor will be us." The room was silent. Mark's lawyers were whispering furiously to him. He looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted around the room, finally landing on me and Chloe, sitting against the wall. A flicker of an idea seemed to cross his mind. A desperate, last-ditch effort. He stood up, pointing a trembling finger at David. "This is because of her, isn't it?" he snarled. "You are doing this to try and get a better price. You are using my family against me." He turned to Chloe. "Honey, your mother's company is trying to extort us." Chloe looked completely lost. "My mother's company? Mom, what is he talking about? You do not have a company." It was time. I stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to me. Mark looked at me with contempt. "Sit down, Helen," he snapped. "The adults are talking." I walked from the wall to the main table, my footsteps echoing in the silent room. I stood next to David, directly across from Mark. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "I do not think we have been properly introduced." I looked at Chloe, whose face was a mask of confusion. "Sweetie," I said gently, "I am not just a poor old housewife." I turned my gaze back to Mark, whose face was slowly registering a dawning horror. "My name is Helen Louise Monroe Peterson," I said, letting each word land with precision. "But you might know me by my professional name. Ash L. Monroe. I am the founder and majority shareholder of Oratech. And you, Mr. Vance, have been trying to steal my company." The silence that followed was absolute. Chloe made a small, choking sound. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. She looked from me to the Oratech logo on David's folder, the connection finally snapping into place in her mind. Mark stared at me, his face a grotesque mixture of disbelief, fear, and rage. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by the raw panic of a man whose world had just imploded. "No," he whispered. "It cannot be." "Oh, but it can," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "You see, you made a critical error in your research. You assumed that because I lived a simple life, I was a simple woman. You thought you could use my daughter, my own child, to manipulate me and steal what I've spent my life building." I took a step closer to the table, leaning forward slightly. I was in control now. This was my room. My game. "You are right about one thing," I continued, my voice low and intense. "This is personal. You came into my family. You poisoned my daughter's mind against me. You belittled me. You condescended to me, and you planned to destroy the livelihoods of my 600 employees to save your own pathetic, debt-ridden sham of a company." I looked over at Chloe. Tears were streaming down her face. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is this true?" "It is all true, sweetie," I said, my gaze softening for a moment. "I am so sorry you had to find out this way." I turned back to Mark, my expression hardening again. "So, let us be very clear about what happens now. Your offer to acquire Oratech is rejected. Emphatically. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Oratech became the sole owner of your debt. Which means I own you, Mark. Your company, your office, the shiny car you drive. It all belongs to me now." Mark sank into his chair, defeated. His lawyers were pale, shuffling their papers as if looking for an escape clause that did not exist. "But I am not interested in your company," I said, delivering the final blow. "It is worthless. I am, however, interested in this." David slid another folder across the table. "That is evidence of your illegal stock manipulation and insider trading activities related to this acquisition attempt. We have records of your communications, your trades. It is all there. I am sure the Securities and Exchange Commission will find it very interesting reading." Mark's head snapped up. Pure terror was etched on his face. "You would not." "Watch me," I said. The present tense felt right. This was happening now. I am watching him crumble. "Unless you do one thing for me." He looked at me, a glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. "Anything." I nodded to my personal lawyer, Arthur, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table. He stood up and placed a document in front of Mark. It was the post-nuptial agreement. "You will sign that," I said. "It protects my daughter from your financial ruin. It ensures that when you go down, you do not take her with you. You will sign it and you will give it to her, and you will tell her it was your idea. You will tell her you are doing it to protect her. It will be the one and only decent thing you have ever done for her." Mark stared at the document, then at me, his eyes burning with hatred. But he was trapped. He knew it. He picked up the pen, his hand shaking, and signed his name. "Now get out," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Get out of my boardroom." Mark and his lawyers scrambled to their feet and practically fled the room. The only people left were me, my team, and my daughter, who was sobbing quietly in her chair against the wall. I walked over to her and knelt down. She looked at me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, gut-wrenching shame. "Mom, I am so sorry," she cried, her voice cracking. "I did not know. I was so awful to you." I said such horrible things." "Yes, you did," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I did not offer her false comfort. She needed to feel the weight of this. You did." "Can you forgive me?" she asked, her voice small. I looked at my daughter, the child I had raised, the woman she had become. I saw the girl I loved, but I also saw the stranger who had hurt me so deeply. "I do not know, Chloe," I said honestly. "That is a question we will have to answer another day. Right now, you have a choice to make. You can stay with that man, the one who used you and lied to you, or you can come home." I stood up and turned to leave. "The choice is yours," I said, without looking back. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving her alone with the ruins of her new life. The first battle was won, but the war for my daughter's heart and my own peace was far from over. The aftermath was swift and brutal, just as I had planned. David and our legal team executed the acquisition of VentureCorp's debt. We called the loans. As predicted, Mark was in immediate default. His company, the hollow shell he had built on lies, crumbled into bankruptcy within 48 hours. The news reports were merciless, painting him as a charismatic fraud who had finally been exposed. His investors lost everything. His name was mud in the financial world he so desperately wanted to conquer. 2 days after the meeting, my lawyer, Arthur, confirmed that the SEC had opened a formal investigation into Mark Vance for securities fraud and insider trading. His legal troubles were just beginning. He was facing fines, disgorgement of any illicit profits, and very likely prison time. I had not just taken his company. I had taken his future. There was a cold satisfaction in that, a sense of righteous justice for the people he had tried to harm, including me and my employees. My daughter, Chloe, did not come home that night, or the next. I did not hear from her for a week. I worried, of course. A part of me, the mother part, wanted to rush to her side, to fix her pain, to tell her everything would be okay. But the other part of me, the part she had wounded, knew that I had to let her sit with the consequences of her choices. She had chosen Mark's glittering world over my quiet one. Now she had to see that world for the mirage it truly was. During that week of silence, I spoke with Sarah every day. She was my rock, my sounding board. "Have you heard from her?" she asked during one of our calls. "Not a word," I said, sipping a cup of tea in my kitchen. The silence of the house felt heavier now. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of genuine concern. "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. "I am sad for her. I am sad for us. But I am not sorry for what I did. He was a predator, Sarah. And he was teaching my daughter to be one too." "You did what you had to do, Helen," she affirmed. "You protected your company, your people, and ultimately you protected her, even if she cannot see that yet. You gave her an escape route with that post-nup." "I know," I said. "But it feels like I had to perform a kind of surgery. I had to cut away a diseased part of her life, and the wound is going to be deep." "Wounds heal," Sarah said. "Especially when the infection is gone. She will come around. She is your daughter. She has your strength in her, even if it is buried under a lot of expensive handbags right now." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. It felt good. "Thank you, Sarah." I needed to hear that. My conversation with David was entirely different. It was professional, focused, and forward-looking. We met in my home office, the hobby room, to discuss the fallout and our next steps. "The VentureCorp assets are worthless," he reported, looking over a spreadsheet on his tablet. "The brand is toxic, the technology is outdated, and the client list is fleeing. But their office space is prime real estate. We can absorb it for our expansion." "Good," I said. "And their employees?" "Most of them were salespeople and marketers, selling a dream," David said. "Not a lot of substance. But I have identified a handful of junior analysts who are bright and were just following orders. They were unaware of Mark's fraudulent activities. I think we could find a place for them at Oratech." "Offer them positions," I said immediately. "I will not punish the people at the bottom for the sins of the man at the top. Give them a chance to do honest work." David smiled. "I knew you would say that. That is why people are loyal to you, Helen. To H. L. Monroe. You build things, you do not just break them." His words meant a lot to me. It was a reminder of who I was, beyond the hurt and the anger. I was a creator, a builder. Mark was a destroyer. We were opposites. And in our confrontation, my philosophy had won. "So, what is next for Oratech?" I asked, changing the subject. "The world is our oyster," David said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "With VentureCorp out of the way, we have an opportunity to move into a new market sector. The acquisition of their debt was a masterstroke. It has sent a message to the entire industry." "What message is that?" I asked. "That H. El Monroe is not to be trifled with, he said with a grin. And that Oratech has very, very deep pockets. Our quiet little company is not so quiet anymore. Perhaps that is a good thing, I mused. Perhaps it is time I stopped hiding. Finally, after 8 days of silence, Chloe called. Her voice was small, fragile. Mom? I am here, Chloe, I said simply. Can I come over? She asked, her voice thick with unshed tears. My door is always open for you, I said. She arrived an hour later. She looked terrible. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled, her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked like she had not slept in a week. She was holding a single, small suitcase. The mountain of designer luggage she had accumulated was gone. She stood in the doorway of my simple, comfortable home, the one she had pitied, and she just looked at me. He is gone, Mom, she said, her voice breaking. He packed a bag last night and left. The lawyers told him he is going to prison. He blamed me. He said I was his bad luck. He said I was a stupid little girl who had ruined everything. I felt a surge of protective anger, but I pushed it down. This was not the time for my anger. This was the time for her pain. I opened my arms, and she collapsed into them, sobbing like a child. I held her, stroking her hair, just like I did when she was little and had scraped her knee. We stood there in the doorway for a long time. When her sobs subsided, I led her into the kitchen and made her a cup of tea, the way she liked it, with milk and 2 sugars. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had started my company all those years ago. I was so stupid, she whispered, staring into her mug. I believed all of it. The money, the power, the talk about being a titan of industry. I let it go to my head. I thought that was what mattered. Why, Chloe? I asked gently. Why did you change so much? You were never like that. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a shame that was painful to see. I think I was insecure, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Mark's world was so big, so glamorous. And I was just me, Chloe Peterson, the girl from the suburbs. I felt like I had to prove I belonged there. And the easiest way to do that was to look down on where I came from. To look down on you. She started to cry again. Calling you a poor old housewife. Mom, that is the most shameful thing I have ever done. It was cruel, and it was a lie. I was so desperate to feel important, I tried to make you feel small. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold. I know, sweetie, I said. But the question is, what do you do now? I do not know, she said, looking around the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. I have nothing. The condo was in the company's name. The car, too. My bank account is almost empty. He spent everything we had and more. You do not have nothing, I corrected her gently. You have that suitcase. And you have me. You can stay here as long as you need to. This is your home. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a dawning gratitude. Really? After everything? You are my daughter, Chloe, I said. That has never changed. You made a terrible mistake. You got lost. But you can find your way back. It will take time. And it will take work. You need to rebuild your life, on your own terms this time. How? She asked, looking helpless. I have a degree in art history. I have never had a real job. Mark always said my job was to look good at parties. Well, that job is officially terminated, I said with a small smile. You are smart, Chloe. You are capable. You just forgot. We will figure it out. Maybe you can start by helping me. In my hobby room, a flicker of a smile touched her lips. I would like that, she said. I would like to learn about what you really do. I want to know who my mother is. I would like that too, I said. The healing process was slow. It was not a movie montage where everything was fixed in a week. There were hard days. Days when Chloe was filled with anger at Mark, and days when she was filled with shame at her own behavior. We had to have many difficult conversations. We had to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. I did not offer her a high-paying job at Oratech. That would have been the easy way out, and it would not have taught her anything. Instead, I gave her a project. I had a small charitable foundation that I ran anonymously, funding arts programs in underprivileged schools. I asked her to manage it. It does not pay much, I told her. Just a small stipend. But it is important work. It is about giving kids a chance to create, to find their own voice. Her eyes lit up. It was a perfect fit for her art history degree, but more than that, it was work with meaning. It was the opposite of Mark's world, which was all about taking. This was about giving. She threw herself into it. She worked from a small desk in my office. I watched her regain her confidence, not the brittle, arrogant confidence she had with Mark, but a quiet, solid self-assurance that came from doing good work and making a real difference. She was finding herself again. About 6 months later, Mark Vance was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Chloe and I watched the news report together. She had no tears for him. She just looked at the screen with a sad, distant expression. He got what he deserved, she said quietly. Yes, he did, I agreed. She turned to me, her eyes clear and direct. Mom, I know I have said it before, but I need to say it again. I am so sorry for how I treated you. I was a different person then. A person I never want to be again. I know, Chloe, I said, and this time, when I looked at her, the hurt was finally gone. It had been replaced by a new kind of love, one that had been tested and had survived. I forgive you. We hugged, a real, heartfelt hug. It felt like coming home. Life settled into a new normal. Chloe continued to run the foundation, and she was brilliant at it. She expanded its reach, creating new programs and partnerships. She was happy, truly happy, in a way I had not seen since before she met Mark. She started dating again, a kind, funny teacher who loved her for who she was, not who her mother was. As for me, I continued to run Oratech, but I made a change. I was no longer L. Monroe, the anonymous founder. At the next major tech conference, I gave the keynote address myself. I walked out onto that stage as Helen Peterson, and I told my story. The story of a woman who started a company on her kitchen table. The story of a mother who tried to protect her child. The story of a poor old housewife who built an empire. The applause was deafening. But the only thing that mattered to me was the look on my daughter's face in the front row. She was beaming, her eyes shining with a pride that was real and deep. That evening, we had dinner together at a small, quiet restaurant. You were amazing today, Mom, she said, raising her glass of water and a toast. Absolutely amazing. Thank you, sweetie, I said. You know, she said, a thoughtful expression on her face. In a weird way, I am almost grateful to Mark. I raised an eyebrow. Grateful? That is a strong word. I know, she said. But if it were not for him, if he had not been so awful, I might have never woken up. I might have stayed that shallow, awful person forever. And I would have never known who my mother really is. I would have missed out on knowing the most incredible woman in the world. Tears welled in my eyes. Oh, Chloe, it is true, she insisted. He tried to tear us apart, but in the end, he brought us closer than we have ever been. I looked at my daughter, this strong, compassionate, wonderful woman sitting across from me, and I knew she was right. Our family had been through a fire, but we had come out the other side, not burned, but forged stronger. I still live in my simple house on the quiet, tree-lined street. I still find joy in my garden. On the surface, nothing has changed. I am still, in many ways, a housewife. But now, the word is no longer an insult. It is a part of my story, a testament to the fact that strength is not always loud and flashy. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is underestimated. And sometimes, when it is pushed too far, it can change the world. Chloe had wanted to see how the real world worked. I had shown her. And in the process, we had both found our way back to the only world that truly mattered, our own.